Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Griffin Spalding Chamber of Commerce, please allow me to say welcome to everyone and thank you for joining us tonight for an informal discussion on the value of collaboration. Tonight's dinner is just another step in a process which began several years ago when the Board of Directors of the Chamber of Commerce observed the positive effect collaborative planning was having in some of our nearby communities. At that time, as recent past chairs of the Chamber of Commerce, Stephanie Wyndham and I began working with Bonnie and the board of the Chamber on ways that the Chamber could help facilitate more open and regular communication between our community's elected boards and other significant constituency groups. So every one of you here tonight either represents one of those elected boards or one of those identified constituency groups. Helen Keller once said, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." However, it was Major League Baseball outfielder manager and 1966 Hall of Famer Casey Stengel who said, "Getting good players is easy, getting them to play together is the hard part." Hopefully tonight can be the beginning of our playing together as a community for the betterment of all. Now, if you would, please join me in an invocation which will be followed by a pledge to our nation's flag. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this gathering of dedicated community stewards we have in attendance tonight. Please look down upon us and offer your wisdom and guidance and open our minds to the views of others with the ultimate goal of the common good. Thank you for the bounties of this earth and the many blessings you have bestowed upon us. Accept our gratitude for your most unselfish gifts of the birth, sacrifice, and resurrection of your own Son, which manifests itself around us in this season of rebirth. Bless the food we are about to partake, as well as the hands which prepared it. It is in your holy name we pray. Amen. Please join me. Thank you, and now I believe the order is we start serving on the left and work our way down the table. I mean, start on the right and work our way to the left. Correct, Wade?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. So we can just start at the head table and then start. So the other thing
study on that the other day. Excuse me?
That's probably what he's based on. Well, for us, that's
Woman to hold the office of mayor in Jackson's 189-year history. Wow. We all probably know her best from her 11 years as president of the Henry County Chamber, where she did a wonderful job. We're just happy to have Kay here. She told me to keep it short, not to do her whole bio, so if y'all will join me in welcoming Kay.
Thank you, Stephanie. Well, good evening. You know, I was telling Stephanie and Chuck earlier that running for mayor was not on my bucket list. I did not retire to do that, but some of my so-called friends taught me into it during this Alzheimer's month that I was having last summer. And I ran, and here I am. But I got really excited about it, and I was excited about planting trees and making things beautiful in our town. And I spent most of the day today in the sewers finding out what the problems were with that. So looks like I'm going to be spending more time underground than on top of the ground. But I'm enjoying being mayor. And thank you for having me here tonight. I got to tell you, folks, you're a good-looking crowd. Just look around. You're a good, look at him. He's saying, where are they? Where are they? He's offering me his glasses. You've just been together so much, you don't recognize that you're a good-looking crowd. And I think that's a pretty strong statement. This is a great-looking bunch of folks, and know lots of you, and it's delightful to be here, and I've worked with many of you in many different capacities, and I won't go through all of that, but I do want to say what a pleasure it is to be here with my colleague, Bonnie Brogner. And Bonnie does a good job representing you with a lot of prestige, and to the extent that her colleagues voted her the Chamber Person of the Year a couple of years ago, and it's just an honor to be here with you today, Bonnie. And I want to tell you that when I walked in, I wanted to get older faster, because this is a pretty neat place you got going here. I mean, this is something. What a wonderful contribution to the seniors of your community. A big accomplishment on your part. I don't have a great speech. I just wrote out about 10 lines here just before coming over here. And that is just to encourage you to undertake this collaboration. When you think about it, it's just such a simple idea. Oh my goodness. The school board talking to the board of commissioners, talking to the city council, talking to the hospital authority, talking to the development authority, talking to the technical college system, talking to the university system. Gee, what a novel idea about planning for the future. That all these leaders would come together and establish some common goals, and that they would pool their very limited resources in this day and age and work together till we achieve those goals. I just don't know why it's not mandated by law that we all do it, and then that would probably take away the uniqueness of getting that done. But you are enjoying something that we enjoyed, and I want to tell you up front, I apologize if I make references to Henry. I've already been beaten up about that in Butts. When I was running, they would say, well, we don't want to hear about Henry County, and we don't want to look like Henry County. And I said, well, that's obvious, you know, but... And then there were a few people that said, no, I'd like to have a little of that prosperity. Bring it over across the line. We'd like to see a few of those things happen here. But those are my experiences. That's where we put this program together. And you, like Henry, and like us, and Butts, are small enough that you can do this. The first time that we started this activity in Henry, Bob White and I with the Development Authority were hosting a dinner just like this one, where we brought everybody in one room together. And I have no idea, so if I'm offending you, just have to be offended by this. But when we would bring you all in one room, everybody sat with the people they work with every day. School board members were with school board members, and hospital folks were with hospital folks, and County commissioners were with county commissioners and so forth and so forth. It's just such a natural, you know, it's like going to the family reunion and you cook all day and get ready and go and you sit down and eat with the same people you eat with every night, right? Never quite understood all of that. So we did this for 3 years, and the next year we got smart and we assigned seating. Said, no, we're not gonna let you sit together. You're gonna have to get to know the folks from the next town and the next board and so forth. And they kind of liked that. And we brought a speaker, someone that we thought that our community would profit from if they had the opportunity to hear them. So we did this for a few years and we said, you know, we need to expand this a little bit more. So the chamber took on the responsibility of organizing intergovernmental retreats. And we actually wound up on my watch doing 6 or 7 of those. After those 3 years of doing a dinner just like this. And what we did was invite every member, every elected and every appointed leader in Henry County. Did they all come ever at one time? No. Does the participation vary based on the leadership of the day? Oh yeah. Was it always perfect? No. Was it productive? Absolutely. It's absolutely amazing. We wound up taking usually about 60 people out of town for 2 days every year to this retreat. And we struggled with the name retreat for hours. Oh, we can't call it a retreat. We've got to call it something else. You know, we can't do that. Well, we always came back to retreat. So good luck. You'll probably wind up calling that because that's actually what it is. And we wound up having all of the school board and the school superintendent. We wound up having the water authority and the head of that organization, and the board of commissioners, and the city councils and the city managers of the 4 cities in that community. And the list goes on and on and on. Everybody was invited, but those were kind of the core folks that usually wound up going every time. And we always went to a place that had something to tell us about the subject we were going to discuss, okay? And the subject for the very first one, we picked for them, and the subject was economic development. So I would greatly encourage you, if you follow this model, don't leave it wide open because you'll spend 2 days, there's too much to talk about, and you won't accomplish much at all. But focus in on one subject. And we always made sure we had an excellent facilitator that kept us on track, and there are some great ones in this state. And we did a ton of planning ahead of time to make sure that this all worked. And the planning staff for these events, the chamber was the leader in all of this, but we invited someone from our county commission staff. Depending on the topic, we may have somebody from one of the cities. We had key people involved, but the old reliables always in community development, and that was Georgia Power and our EMCs, and in some cases our technical college, depending on the event and the subject. But those were the folks that loaned us somebody to work with us in the planning stage and make all this come together. And I usually went out and decided, got some recommendations on where we would go. And the idea of going out of town, there's a lot of reasons for that, but one, do not, and you will make this mistake, do not get in a room and somebody say, oh, well, they've got a great little facility down here in Forsyth, or they got one over here at, you know, Lake Jackson or wherever, and we'll just run over there and do it. Don't do it. Because somebody will go home to watch a ball game, somebody will go home for a church meeting, somebody will run back for somebody's birthday dinner. You'll lose people. So get 50 to 60 miles out of town. You want that audience to be with you from the beginning to the end. Dedicate that much time to each other. And have as much fun as you have work to do. That was is so very important in this process. So we started at 10 o'clock on a Thursday meeting at some place out of town, and we went through all day Thursday and facilitated trainings. We adjourned about 4 o'clock. Then we assembled for a really, really fun night. And then the next morning we did the same thing and went home on Friday afternoon, okay? And after that very first retreat here, we had the topic for collaboration. At that that retreat, before we went home, the participants picked the topic for next year's event. So you own it after that. You're in control of what's going on. You're just getting started, but then you are ready to go. And here are some of the places that we went as a result of this. The first one was Callaway Gardens. And the reason for that was the topic was economic development, and LaGrange and Kia and all of that had just cranked up. And we wanted to hear the impact. We wanted to hear the story. We brought in some of the best economic developers, some of David's colleagues around the state. If this were someplace else, they'd invite David, but now he's just going to be one of you. And you bring in some of the ones that have just got some amazing stories to tell about how they've approached economic development, not the least of which is Gwinnett County, which has put together an amazing story on their partnership up there, and one that most all of us ought to look at. And it's not that you're going to replicate these things, but you're going to find things in them that you can take away and put together in your community that will work as well. And it's not hard to have your fun night when you're at Callaway Gardens, obviously. We went to Columbus because our topic was transportation. And that was the year we were looking at the tax, the SPLOST tax, the T-SPLOST tax, and just inundated ourselves with transportation in our own community and talked about our projects and why those projects and so forth. And Columbus has done a good job in the arena of transportation, particularly with their unified government down there. We went to Rome for quality of life. And what a great little community, place to live and enjoy and be. And it's interesting because the Romans have now decided, oh wow, we've got 5 rivers. Who knew? So they're now really taking advantage of those rivers. And they're developing those rivers as a part of the quality of life and the attraction of living in Rome. So at the end of that Thursday evening, and we went to the Chick-fil-A property on the back of the Berry campus, and I highly recommend it because you think you're in the French countryside. It's a great location to talk about quality of life. Put all of our participants on a bus, took them down to the foot of the little mountain hill, put them on a party boat that held all of them, a barge on the river, floated all the way down to the city of Rome, had some nice beverages iced down in the cooler waiting for them after they'd been in session all day. Took them down to Rome, went past the city, turned around, came back up the river, and got off at a park, had a bus pick us up, took us to so that they could see what Rome was beginning to do on their riverfront. Went back up to the main street, went to an old building like you've got so many of, and they have put a museum in that's things that occurred in my lifetime, now museum quality items. But had looked at the museum, went upstairs, had a private dinner catered in upstairs, and then we walked from that location at one end of Main Street to the opposite end of Main Street to a dessert shop, and everybody had desserts. But the point was, it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night on a Thursday night, and Rome was booming. The town was alive, people were walking, they were going to restaurants, they were sitting at little parks and they were talking. Rome was alive. And that's what we wanted to show everybody. Because if you've ever noticed, even when NASCAR is in town, McDonough doesn't stay open. Go figure. And we kept trying to tell these folks, you gotta have something going on for folks to come to downtown. And that was a great opportunity and lesson for everybody to see there. We went to Madison when we were talking about planning and development. And I don't know of anybody that's controlled that any better in this state than the city of Madison. My town has 5,000 people, just under it. And my general operational fund is $3 million, and I have 50 employees. Madison has fewer citizens, closer to 4,000. They have a general operation budget of $7 million, and they have 75 full-time staff people, and 15 of them are in planning. Isn't it amazing? But that was their priority. They wanted to develop the kind of town that they have developed. And one of the most fascinating things they said to all those Henry County leaders when we were just developing like crazy was, we say no to some things. For one thing, we don't allow gated communities. Their attitude is, this whole town's going to move forward together, or we're not going. So we don't need gated communities. I don't think they have a single private school in the city. They have an amazing, great public school. It wasn't always that way, because in another life, I used to work that territory in education, and they couldn't make that statement several years ago, but they built it into that. And now they share that unity of the same high schools and the same football team and the same school system and the beauty of that town. They made some obvious vision decisions, and it's paid off in quantum leaps for that community. We went to Athens because our subject was public education, and we drew on some of the resources of the university system to help us with that particular conference. When we talked about that topic, we made it clear we were going to talk about our K-12 school system for 2 days, because I believe with all my heart in every single one of these communities, hate to use the term fix, but fix your public school system, strengthen it, make it all it can be, and I believe most everything else falls into place. But everybody's got to be on board. And it doesn't matter where your own kids go, that's not the issue. But the issue is that the majority of our population will always be in the public school system, and therein lies the future of every community in America. And that is the organization that has formed the very fabric of America. If I asked you all to hold up your hand if you went to a public school, 99% in this room would do that. If I asked you where do your children go, or where do your grandchildren go, it would be a much smaller percentage. Okay? So therein lies one of the problems that we've got. One of my favorite examples is when Northwest and Delta merged, and Northwest employees were coming from Minnesota. Minnesota ranks first and second in healthcare and education in America. Can you just imagine the thrill of those employees when they're told, we're moving you and your family to Georgia? That had to be a little bit shocking to everybody. And yet they lived in the coldest place in this country. Can you imagine when you go fishing, you dig a hole in the ice and sit there and watch this line drop through? Yet we've got all this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place. But yet it was a challenge for families to make that move because of those two issues. Guess where, and we know this for a fact, guess where a majority of those families moved to when they came to Metro Atlanta? Guess. Everybody knows it, you see. They went to Fayette County. Now, whether that's real or perception about that system being that much better, it is definitely the perception. And those families just immediately went there based on reputation of the school system, okay? And there are industries there, international industries there, that are there for the very same reason. So if we all had one thing that we could hone in on and say, we're going to be number one, we're going to be world class in our education system, we would solve, in my mind, every other issue that comes this way. I truly, truly believe that. And when we had that particular session, it was fascinating because we have some older council members and commissioners. And I'll never forget one of them leaned across the table to the then young chairman of the school board, and he said, what do you do with all that money? And when those 2 days were over, his attitude was, how do they survive with the challenges they are facing and the lack of funding in this state that we put toward public education to address the real issues? Huge, huge benefit for that week. Well, one other place we went was Carrollton. That was the last one, and we were back to economic development. And Carrollton has Carroll Tomorrow. That's a fascinating program for you to look at in economic development. It has paid off tremendously for that community. And they have an amazing entrepreneurial incubator where they are producing young businesses that are getting good starts, and they're pushing them out into the community. So we've got great stories right here in our state, and it behooves us to get around and to see them. And when you get to go in one of these situations, it's like that town 101 in a hurry, because you're getting to see all the things that have worked, but at the same time, you're getting to talk about those issues in your own community. After each of these retreats and these facilitated sessions, we came home with a summary, a written summary, of what we had done and what we said we were going to do. You know, what are our goals? Who's going to pick what? Who's going to take this on? And when are we going to get it done? Wrote them down, made them commitments to each other that we were going to do that. And remember that a huge recession hit us in the middle of all of this too. So certainly that had an impact as well. But today, that community has a checklist that they can check off of things that were accomplished in these retreats. And I'm only going to tell you about 2 of them. There are many, some of them are small, and some of them are large. It ranges from everything. They didn't own the airport at that point. They made a decision to buy the airport at one of these meetings. So things like that. But the 2 things I want to tell you about was, one, we came home one year and formed a task force on economic development. And we met for many, many months after that, and we developed literally a written report on what we should do to ensure stronger economic development in our community. A very valuable little document, and that's when the recession hit us shortly after that. The latest big task was, and some of the folks in this room had been part of this, Dr. Peters and other people, and that was our E-squared task force, Economics and Education, E-squared. Had 104 rank and file citizens and leaders work for about a year and a half in 6 work groups on subjects we had defined that we needed to look at relative to pushing public education forward in our community. Now, Henry has its share of private schools and colleges. They were all invited to come to the table and help us. They did come, and we made it clear our subject would be the public school system. But they had as much of an interest in that as if we were talking about their own institutions, and we greatly appreciated that. And that group came out with another written report on what, if Henry County would embrace all these recommendations across the board, that ultimately it would achieve greatness in its school system. Henry has a good school system. This was going to make it a great school system. And what you hope comes from these things is that one day down the road in a community with the resources that size, is that that becomes its own institution. That there is a full-time person working to do nothing but just push this task force to the brink and organize people. And I did that for as long as I could and do all the other things required of the chamber. But one of the things we did was organize churches. We have 4 distinct pods of school systems, of the way the school system is organized, and we asked the churches in each of those pods to adopt the schools in their pods, you know? And not just for the purpose of going over and praying with them, although that's okay too, but for the purpose of actually finding out what is the academic plan for that school. It's not rocket science. What are they trying to do in this school to achieve these grade levels or these on tests and so forth? Actually get to know what the academic plan is, and then see what resources exist in your church to help them get there. There may be a science person in your church. There may be an old mathematician. Who knows? But figure out what it is you as a community can do to make that school successful. And then when they succeed, celebrate them as if they had just brought home the state football championship. Make academics as exciting as any sports. Make it a priority in the community. And the churches were all over that, but honestly, I could have spent my life just dealing with the churches. They wanted to do. They just wanted somebody out front pulling them along and guiding them in the direction they needed to do. Dr. Peters can bear witness to this. The big results of the E-squared task force, we secured a technical college, first time in the history. Henry was the largest population in the state not served by its own technical college. So we went after it. We were very fortunate. We worked hand in glove with the leadership of then Griffin Tech and then eventually Southern Crescent. And now there is a building open. There is a second one in the works, and it's geared for an 8-building campus in Henry County. Total direct result. We sat down with our legislative delegation in August, when we had already worked with the technical college, with the technical college system at the state level, with the governor, everybody, making our case. we said, you know, we probably ought to let our legislators know what we're doing. So we called them together, and one of them actually had the audacity to laugh and say, you'll never get that done. You need to go back and hold some bake sales. Now, we needed, I think at the time, $8 million, $9 million. And we said, we don't think we can make that many pound cakes. Just don't think it's possible. And we were infuriated. And he is no longer in office, thank goodness. And we saw we weren't going to get any help from these guys. We were in the governor's budget 2 months later, on our way to the session in January with the funding for our school, over the heads of our legislative delegation. We have a new delegation now. They're gone, okay? So grassroots works. If you work it right and work through the system, you can make these things happen. We got the college. We got a career and college academy for our public school system when only a few per year were being approved, but we wound up as the winners of one of those. And then we went on with the same kind of organization and secured a $3 million grant out of the Lieutenant Governor's office to help build out additional labs for our career and college academy. And all that happened in a fairly short amount of time, just by getting everybody organized and pushing and making things happen. So those are pretty big items. There were some smaller items. We couldn't get everybody to agree on the economic incentives for the attraction of businesses. There had been this stalemate for some time between a couple of our agencies, and they just couldn't get it together. It had been a few years, and they hadn't gotten it together. Got them all in one room and said, you know, we need to figure out what this problem is and sign off on the dotted line, and we got our incentive worked out. So sometimes it's just a matter of letting everybody know what's going on and bringing everybody together and putting a little pressure on that, that this is bigger than whatever this problem is, and we need to work it out. It's a great activity. I'll open to questions if you have any. It requires some energy, it requires some dedication on your part. It can be a lot of fun. But if you think about, and I've seen this as mayor, I've always been in an advocacy position my whole life for somebody, working for a board or whatever. But I am realizing that there is a little bit more power when you have a bully pit, like the mayor's seat. And you're all sitting in one of those seats, in one capacity or another. You've got a lot of power going on in this room. Just imagine if you harness it toward one or two goals that you're going to set your mind to accomplish. And you're going to feel really, really good once you have made those accomplishments. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, if there ever were trucks of money coming from Washington, Atlanta, they're not rolling anymore. That day's over. So all you've got is each other. And whether we like it or not, we're pretty competitive with each other as neighbors because we're all so hungry for economic development and for things to happen. But my theory is, if you do well, we'll do better. And my theory is that eventually we're going to figure out that regionalism works. And eventually the south side of Atlanta is going to get its act together, as well as the north side's been together for a long time. And you're going to see a lot more power come in this direction when we're meeting and we're deciding some things regionally. So let's do it at home first. We don't have it either in Jackson. It's going to be a pull to get that done too. But then let's decide regionally what we want to see happen, and let's go after it as an entire region. And I promise you, you will see amazing results come out of the General Assembly and the places that make some pretty big decisions that impact the state. Questions? Yes?
Yeah, you mentioned about strengthening schools and right part about finance. What are some of the things you saw that would be to strengthen the school system?
Oh gosh. Well, we have these task forces organized, and you need to get a copy of our E-Squared report. I didn't mention that. We had a 45-page document, and the chamber will be glad to share that with you. And that's what the community came up with as the goals that we wanted to pursue. And our goal was to organize people to adopt and support the schools in their neighborhood. And those people are in homeowners associations, great source to work with. It's in the faith-based community. It's in civic organizations across the board. and again, figure out what the individual school that you're working with needs and go make that happen. One of the things that amazed me, one of the groups was readiness for school. And that was the group that scared me the most, because how do you really get a handle around what you're going to do with families to help them get kids ready for school? That's an arena you just don't have much control over. Well, after just a few meetings, they discovered that after talking to some elementary teachers, that a first grade teacher could just about tell you which daycare a child had gone to, based on that child's preparedness for kindergarten and first grade. They could just about tell you the kids that had been watching Barney versus the kids that had been given some true skills and activities for developmental purposes, okay? And that kind of shocked us, you know? So we decided we'll develop our own set of standards for daycares. There are 200 in that community. And we'll ask the daycares to volunteer to go through this checklist and talk to us about what they're doing in their school. And we'll have our own good housekeeping seal of approval. We had all these great plans. Then we found out the state of Georgia had already figured out that they weren't getting all they needed to get out of their lottery preschool money that they were investing in daycares for the delivery of the programs that it was funding. So the state was doing the same thing simultaneously, and we didn't realize that. Well, one day we finally connected, the two of us, after we'd made enough contacts that they were doing that. So we got 10 daycares to serve as the model, as the place to test the new state standards for daycares, okay? Meaning that these are your progressive daycares. They're the ones that are really, really trying and so forth. So the idea was to eventually grow that to all 200 of the daycares, but they were well on their way to trying to make that happen. Well, that's not something you put on a billboard and you're real excited about, but it's a monumental step in helping schools. It ranged from everything from volunteers. We developed a mentoring program for the school system. I'm sure that Griffin Spalding has one as well, probably. We didn't have one that was so well thought out, though, in terms of training materials and the process that you go through and the ease of registering to be a part of that and so forth, and developed a pretty broad-based mentoring and tutorial system in hand in glove with the school system. I'm going to tell you, it depends on your leadership, and that's the answer to everything. It is the answer to everything, leadership. And you can just kind of pass that off as, I'm a leader. Maybe not, if things aren't happening. It's all about who is making these kinds of things happen. And we had two amazing school superintendents on my watch. One was Jack Parrish, and the other was Ethan Hilbert. And I'm sure this one is just as good, but I don't know him as well. And they worked with us hand in glove. And what I always respected about that school system, I've seen so many school superintendents stand up and tell you the great things they're doing. And they seldom shared with you the absolute challenges they're facing, you know? So those two guys came to my board meeting every month as a chamber, every month, and they shared the successes of their kids and the successes of their faculty, and then they talked about the warts, and they talked about the challenges in that community, in that school system. And then they said to that group of business leaders, and what are you going to do to help me deal with that? Because it's everybody's problem. Schools can't do it alone. It's everybody's problem. So it opened up a lot of communication, a lot of transparency, so that the community could better address some things. I mean, you know, you can have a planned sick out day, and parents and people not even realize that's going on, and all of a sudden you've got this huge absentee day in your school system. Well, if you're in a community that's aware of these things and you're an employer of one of these kids, or you're standing in the grocery line and the kids running the cash register are planning it across the aisle or whatever, you can step up and say, you know, that's really a rotten idea. And do you realize what this does to funding and da-da-da-da-da? I mean, just a ton of things you can do. And I'll tell you the other thing that's very valuable about this organization you're about to put together. You're all going to have a SPLOST or a bond or some kind of referendum where you need each other desperately. And this gives you an automatic network to go to. So when you come together periodically and then you start working all the resources available to you, you know, Dr. Peters talks to faculty and employees at the school, and Jerry talks to UGA and the hospital and so forth. You've got a heck of a network that can go out there and hopefully vote to make things happen in the community. And that was one of the great things about our chamber board, was that we had, and I'm probably you do too, we had our school superintendent, we had the head of our hospital, we had the board of commissioners, we had the 4 cities, we had the development authority. We had everybody at the table once a month, and if there was a community issue, they could talk about it right then and there, and we could sort of spring into action if there were things that we needed to do across the board to deal with that. So it is just good old-fashioned grassroots organizing.